it's Jennifer Vatsa here, broadcasting live with entirely new color scheme for my hair, a bit rainbowy this time. I'd been wanting to go back to that for years. Finally had a little bit of time to do that. So, yeah, it's interesting because it kind of looks in places it looks a little tie-dyed because we did a lot different. But anyways, new hairstyle aside, tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about how to create a servitor and what that is and how they're used, and a little bit on thought forms since it falls within that rubric, and how you can create your own servitor. Now, I guess to kind of give a little bit of an introduction to the whole concept of thought forms and servitors, I wanted to kind of break down a little bit into what that is in the sort of spiritual realm of occultism, etc. So thought forms are a manifestation of thoughts and ideas or emotions. And, it's believed that they can kind of take form in and of themselves. And that they can also be sensed and perceived by other people as well as yourself. This may be something that happens unintentionally in a lot of cases, like when there's really strong emotions about a situation or a person, that can kind of create a thought form. And you see that kind of come up in a lot of different ways within spiritual practices. It also kind of shows up in some of the more, witchy television shows and things like that, and movies. But there's different types of thought forms. So what we're going to be talking about is a servitor. Now, these can be created unintentionally, but I don't think that's necessarily the best way to go about it. But a servitor is a collection of thoughts or drives that go into this externalized thought form, and they can act autonomously based on how we program it or what our needs are. And that they derive from the consciousness of the creator, and they will have very explicit purpose in what they do. So you could create a servitor to for anything that you want to kind of have working in the background. You could create a servitor for protection and have that be what protects your house. Or like I have hold on, my window. This is technically a servitor, but I created like a protection jar that sits in the window of my house. So, this technically could be something that maybe it's an unintentional servitor, but it that's its purpose. So, the other types, just to give a little bit of a distinction, is that there's what's called a tulpa, and that's a type of thought form that is capable of independent action, and it's got its own personality and identity. It can be an object or an entity that's created. But the tulpa has more of an emotional quality to it than, say, a servitor would. And I think that's kind of the primary difference there, is like, a servitor isn't necessarily going to be like, I mean, there's some, like a tulpa is basically kind of like your imaginary friend in a way. Whereas a servitor is something that, like, your Roomba or, something like that will be kind of like a servitor functions. It's got its purpose. It autonomously functions in the background, but it doesn't have an emotional quality to it. So that's kind of the main difference between those. And what you'll see the other two forms, we talk about a lot of egregores, and those are born when an entity becomes large enough to exist independently, and it's usually shaped by a collective or a group. So if you work in a group of people, like a coven, or within any particular, not even a coven, but like if you're in any particular order or working with a particular group of people, you could create an entity based on sort of like a groupthink thing. So if I was working with, say a group of people, and we all kind of had a thought form that was very similar, like we all agreed on what Lucifer was and how Lucifer looked and how Lucifer talked and whatnot, we could, from our collective thoughts of this group of people, create an egregore of Lucifer. So that's why I like having a more independent um relationship with different entities and not having them necessarily dictated by what other people say, because to me Lucifer has a very particular way he looks most of the time. I occasionally it'll look a little bit like something from a particular artist, but it never is one particular thing. So the next part from that is an egregore. From the egregore is the god form, and that again is incorporating elements of egregores and with the group kind of consciousness of it, and the servitors, and having an anonymous and distinct purpose. So in that sense is you've created an egregore that is like a god form and can autonomously function beyond just that, what an egregore is in that sort of visage. So I hope that in a nutshell, elevators, pitch on the different type of thought forms is helpful. By all means, I am not an expert in this. I just wanted to get it in a nutshell, just so people kind of had a general gist of the area. So what I want to talk about is how you want to go about creating a servitor and what that process details, because servitors were always something I'd heard about, and I knew about it. I just kind of never thought about making one for myself. Like I work with the spirits I work with on particular things, but I never really thought of kind of creating an autonomous servitor to work on my behalf, kind of in the background for very particular things. Now I want to create servitors for everything. So what you're going to do, like for me, I did this part first because it made the most sense in the order of operations, because there's several different steps in creating a servitor. I mean, I have like 3 pages of all my setup instructions for the one I created. But so you want to start out making a sigil for it. You can hand draw a sigil. I mean, this is like the Lucifer sigil. It doesn't have to be, this ornate, but you can draw. I mean, I have sigils drawn all over the place. I mean, it could just be, little squiggly lines, or if you're very artistic, you can, go wild with it. If you're not really all that great at making sigils, you can, simple is better. So that's the first thing I did to connect with it, was make that sigil. So what the next step would be is writing down, really thinking about the purpose. Like, what is this servitor going to do for you? And like I have one that's sort of like a patrol all the time. So you can set them to be something you activate. Like if you want to, I'll get into like the activation codes. Like, you kind of call it like, hey, check on this for me, or go do this, set it on a task, or you can have it on, kind of patrolling and looking for whatever this is. So like if you were doing a protection one, you could have it, kind of patrolling to make sure there's no active threats against you. And then if there are active threats against you, how does it, does it alert you? Does it just go in and, bust the kneecaps of whatever's threatening you magically, your protection in that sense? So you really want to take a lot of time to really spell out like what the purpose of the servitor is going to be, and what its magical powers are. Does it, does it have a self-replication? Does it have a particular thing it does? So the superpowers would be, okay, I have a protection servitor that then, will just return to sender anything that's ever thrown at you. And you kind of don't have to worry about it from that point. So as soon as it detects like someone is throwing some baneful magic your way, it can activate and just go boop and return to sender everything. So you're not constantly having to do some of that work yourself. It's an automation tool, basically. So that's the main part of it. You want to determine the servitor's lifespan. If this is something for a short-term goal, you might indicate that the lifespan of this servitor is for something like, I want to lose weight. So I want to lose 40 pounds. When I'm done losing 40 pounds, the servitor can be retired. So then you'll kind of come upon the terms of how the servitor is retired. Like, I'm retiring any of my servitors to my astral temple. Now, because of, like, if you had a protection servitor, that might be for your lifespan. So, you would have in your kind of your terms, like I wrote everything down in my journal. So you would say, for as long as I shall live, the servitor shall be active. Upon my death, the servitor could then retire to my astral temple, because the astral temple exists without space and time, and you don't have to physically be there. Maybe you can visit it after death. I don't know. So that's where the servitor would go. And it can just, you can find different ways. And I'll get into this a little bit with some of the other details for it. You can pick out what your servitor looks like. Mine wanted to look a very particular way. Your servitor can, look like a fuzzy bunny, or it can look like, a plushie, or anything you want it to look like. It's best, like, when the next part is, and you can also do this if you're doing the sigil for it. You can name your servitor. Now, you don't want to name it something like Joe or Frank or Bob or whatever, but you want to give it something that is a little more unique, and that fits kind of the role of, if we had a protection servitor, like, giving it a name like, Sir Prince something, the Valiant, or whatever. That's one approach, however it works for you. And it also depends on the type, what its active role is. So the next thing you'll do is you'll create an activation code. Now, I have one that I did because I have a long-term one that's kind of on patrol. So I created 2 codes for this, and the code for it should be something. I mean, we live in a world where we have think of it like a password for a website. It can be a phrase. It can be, movements. It can be like, when I listen to this song and, do jazz hands. That can be your activation code for your servitor. So, or a phrase or song lyrics, anything like that. So I did one for the initial activation, and then I did one for if I just want to check in with my servitor. If I sense something about, like, hey, I'm sensing something, can you go check on this? I have a particular activation code I use for that as well. So for my initial activation, what I did, and I'm going to get into that'll come a little bit later, is where you house your servitor, like where it kind of exists. So the next part you want to do is what kind of, you have to feed your servitor. So what kind of offerings or food are you going to feed, are you going to use to sustain it? Now, I have, if you have one that's a protection one, again, I'm just using that one as an example, like, you could have it do it like one of its superpowers could be transmutation, so it just gobbles up any baneful magic that has been being thrown your way and turns it into sustenance, like converts it into positive energy sustenance for itself. So that could be one way. You can make offerings to it. You can burn incense for it, or you can give it certain things. Now, what the most important part of it is, like, you really want to think. I feel like I should have put this part in the steps earlier, but, like, where does this servitor live? Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can pick a physical location for it, or it can kind of exist on the astral realm or within your body. So, like, if it's something like you create the servitor and exists within your physical body, your activation for it might be like, I'm going to wiggle my finger like this. Every time I wiggle my finger like this, you do your job. So it can exist there. It can exist on the astral realm solely. What I did for mine, and I think this makes it a little more tangible, especially if you're making offerings to it, is you can make what's called a spirit house for it. And this can be anything from, I love these little, like, hidey hole books that you get at, like, Halloween time at, like, craft stores and stuff. this could be the spirit house for it, and you would put, the offerings in it. I made an activation scroll for mine, so it had like the sigil. I put a little drop of blood on it. It had the initial activation code, and then I put everything in where I have mine, and the offerings, and it can be anything. And the offerings are going to depend on what the purpose is. If it was, something for protection, maybe you would want to put some protection herbs or essential oils in there. Put some angelica root. Put some sage. Put some Palo Santo sticks. And there are so many things you can use for protection. So put those in as offering. Your protection crystals, like black tourmaline, would be my go-to for that, because I would use that to absorb any of that negative energy coming towards me from anyone else. So thinking about the types of things you would put into your your spirit house. And I like these. I put you can use a jar, you could use any kind of vessel. Like this is something else. It just happens to be the closest jar I have to me. You could use like the genie in a bottle kind of thing. So there's a lot of whatever works for you, and then you kind of pick in the house where, if you're doing a physical thing, where that is. You might live on your altar, you might hide it in the closet, So that is a little bit about what goes into sort of the location of it. So like I said, when I did mine, and you can, however feels the best way to do it for you. You don't have to do it exactly like I did. I took a piece of parchment, I drew the sigil on it and put the activation code. So I had a little scroll that I put in mine. And then with all the offerings, and I can continue to put offerings in there. So, that is definitely something you can do. And you pick the location for it. Now, the thing and this goes into sort of the lifespan of it. You want to pick what they call a fatal flaw. And what the fatal flaw is, that the servitor can retire or be released after, say, my unfortunate demise, or if the spirit, if you're keeping a physical spirit house, if it's lost or damaged or anything like that, you can program a fatal flaw into there that will just deactivate the servitor at any time. So that is a little bit on working with servitors. I created my first one. I had a lot of fun with it. Like, I think as far as, some of these different ritual and spells and practices go, this one I found to be a lot of fun. And because you can be really creative about it, it's almost like if you've ever played any kind of like role-playing games and stuff, like it would be like creating like a character sheet for it. Like you build your character development and all that stuff. Like, what do they do? What are they about? What do they look like? What kind of gear do they have? So my inner nerdiness found it fun to create them from that, like kind of in that aspect. So again, have fun creating your servitors. I know I'm probably going to over time make some other ones. I think this one has been working pretty well so far that I created. I'm not going to give away what I created it for, so because I'm sure my enemies would love to do that. Anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and I love you all.